Welcome to Pitch It To Me podcast, a show about the subjective past, present, and potential future of Flesh and Blood design, where we remind LSS that Levia and Boltyn are in fact heroes in the game. Today's episode will be about the upcoming set Dusk Till Dawn, and by the time you listen to it, all of our predictions will be irrelevant, but maybe you'll find some value in our fun little ideas. On Red Pitch, Clark will ruminate on the reasons of a supplemental set. On Yellow Pitch will be Joel discussing design fixes for Boltyn and Levia. And on Blue Pitch will be Fuzzy giving his version of a new Shadow Runeblade. You can find us across all socials such as TikTok and Instagram at Pitch It To Me Podcast. As we record this episode, we aren't quite sure when it's going to be released. Since this is one of our first episodes and Dusk Till Dawn is on the horizon, we want to discuss it and show that this podcast is going to be talking about upcoming sets and interesting releases in the world of Flesh and Blood. There's a chance you're listening to us talk about all the possible cards that could be printed in Dusk Till Dawn with the entire card list already released. You might be in the future, after all. If so, then just disregard this message. If that's the case, we're not really talking about Dusk Till Dawn, silly. We're talking about Dusk Till Dawn 2. The Duskening. Enjoy the episode. We're going to start off with Clark on Red Pitch.
Yes. For today's Red Pitch, I wanted to take a nice broad approach and talk about what a supplemental set is all about. This idea of like a supplemental set, this like non-draftable set, is something very new to me. I never really encountered it before in a trading card game. Most of my serious trading card game days were with Magic the Gathering, where every single set was intended to be drafted, to have this limited environment. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about like what a supplemental set allows Legend Story Studios to do and some of the unique opportunities that it does. The first and probably the most obvious, what everybody is talking about right now, is filling the holes created by the heroes that Living Legends and the Living Legends mechanic that Flesh and Blood has. It also allows, this is sort of like taking another crack at previously dominant heroes or previously dominant archetypes like Shadow Runeblade or Light Illusionist is what we're getting here, in a way that sort of says, hey, Shadow Runeblade isn't broken. Chain is broken. And now that Chain is gone, we can get a much healthier Shadow Runeblade into the mix.
Like a take two, but less toxic.
Yeah. It keeps people feeling healthy about the game moving forward in terms of, it's sort of like a way of saying, hey, we're bringing this back. It's great for people who invest in legendary equipments or any legendary cards or any big money cards. If someone like foiled out their Light Illusionist deck, they want to use those pretty cards. But if there's no Light Illusionist hero to play in CC, then they've essentially wasted that money. That's really not cool. It's something that Legend Story Studios cares a lot about, rewarding us for that investment. And so reprinting these heroes allows us to use those cards again.
Do you think that they might change that in the future? Because we're starting to have enough heroes to actually have a Living Legend format. And that's something that LSS has talked a little bit about recently at Pro Tour Baltimore. They mentioned that it's kind of like coming up soon, and that would give players an opportunity, right? Like if I could play my foiled out Light Illusionist deck if I wanted to in a Living Legend format when it exists. So I'm just saying I would be interested in seeing how that goes in the future.
I think if anything that even greater supports their mission, because it now means that you can use these cards in two different formats. And you have more places to use them. Not every card shop is going to have enough players who have those heroes to be able to run a Living Legends format. Sort of like how not every single card shop has a legacy scene for Magic the Gathering.
That makes total sense to me.
Yeah, because it's just too much money, or the cards are too old, or it's just, I came into the game way after this time. Yeah, like I totally missed Starvo. I missed Starvo entirely.
Lucky you.
I know. Very lucky me. I never had to deal with that. But it means that, you know, if I want to play Starvo, okay, I can go to that format. Or if it's just too much money for me to get into, I can just avoid it entirely and it's all right. I can still maybe buy some of those cards and still get value from them in Classic constructed elsewhere.
Yeah, and I remember when Starvo and Chain first were getting close to LL, and that was the first that a hero had gotten close to getting to that point. And I don't even remember if Living Legend was talked about at that point until Starvo got banned. Like there was even going to be a Living Legend format. It was kind of seen as this end all be all where that hero's gone, you won't be able to see it. And now that's kind of flipped over completely, which is a good thing for all the reasons you just mentioned, because these heroes that players truly love to play continue on, and they, people don't feel slighted or left out in a way after making this big investment, and even this big time investment too, because people are grinding for tournaments on these heroes and spending thousands of hours practicing, and all of a sudden it's that those skills for that specific deck, whether it's pitch stacking or whatever, aren't being put to use.
I also like it because it adds some depth to it, right? It's like having two Shadow Runeblade heroes means Shadow Runeblade is no longer just about the one hero and the one archetype, the one play style. Mm-hmm. It really broadens it. It opens it up, and I think that's really special as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think so these supplemental sets are also very interesting because they don't have to balance for limited. And so this means that they don't really need to worry about creating a nice draftable archetype, presenting generics that are good for multiple different heroes. They instead get to really focus on printing singular pieces that are really important to certain archetypes or very specific powerful cards. The example that I remember from Everfest that really stood out was Swing Big. Swing Big was something that Brutes loved when it came out. And Brutes were so in love with that card. But Everfest wasn't about Brutes, but it still felt like we could buy that set and get something from it.
Yeah.
It made an excuse for that at the end of the armory when they go, hey, how would you like your winnings? We could say packs and still feel like we would get something from that.
Wow.
Yeah. To expand on that a little bit, for limited environments in Flesh and Blood, it's hard to have more than like 3 or 4 classes represented at a time. And even when there's like 4, like think like Welcome to Wrath, Arcane Rising, like that was a draft that was relatively unforgiving. Like you have to be on a hero pretty early on in the draft to make it work. You have to have a fair amount of generics in the set just to make the draft work with that many different heroes and classes without a lot of overlap. Like Tales of Aria or Outsiders kind of works a little bit nicely because there's overlap between the 3 different draft archetypes. In a supplemental set where you're not worried about limited, you can print little amounts of support for 10 different classes all in the same set that are all able to shake up the metagame just a little bit, give everybody a little bit of tools to play with, and it's a nice way for them to get around that limitation that their limited happens to have,
Yeah, it makes everybody interested in the release because some people are mains, right? We aren't. I think we like lots of different heroes and lots of different archetypes, and that's maybe even a majority of players, but some people are mains. They like illusionists. They only want to play illusionists. And when there aren't illusionist cards in the set, they're not interested. And all of a sudden, well, Flesh and Blood isn't giving me anything for sometimes 6 months to a year at a time. It's very easy for that player to become disinterested in the game and stop showing up to Armory, stop playing the game. These supplemental sets allow you to give that player a little something to say, hey, look, we do listen to you. We do care about you. Please stick around. Please show up to the next thing.
And that's crazy you said that because I can think of several players who are off the game now because they're waiting for support for their hero that because of the way that the scheduling has been, showing up, we just know that they're not going to get support for a while. And then there's so many cards in Everfest that Dash got, and Swing Big obviously is insane. That I see in Dash decks that I completely forgot came out in Everfest because it was like so much going on, and it just made so many decks have these really unique pieces to make it more cohesive. And like you said, if we're not due for another Brute set, but I get Swing Big or something or other, then that'll keep me satiated a little bit at least until the next set.
It also does allow them to create new things without worrying about how it fits into a limited environment. I specifically am thinking about in the most recent release in Dynasty, we saw both this new Runeblade archetype that they were trying out with pitching attack actions and non-attack actions. Another way of playing with that Runeblade attack action, non-attack action happening in the same turn sort of thing, but instead looking at the pitch zone instead. I wonder if we may see this pop up with Vinset, with Shadow. Shadow's trying to pitch a lot of cards and play out of the banished zone. We might something to think
Who
about,
knows?
something to look forward to. But also, we got just a brand new class in Dynasty. The first time we saw Assassin was in one of these supplemental sets. And if I remember reading an article that said that they had wanted to release Assassin in an earlier set, but it didn't feel like it fit with the limited environment. And so they were sitting on this hero like, when do we release this hero? When do we release Arachne? When do we release this class? Because it constantly felt like it wasn't fitting in any limited environments. Here they can say, look, this is great and constructed. Just run it.
I heard that set was Arcane Rising. Can you imagine? That's the second set in the game, and they've just been sitting on it.
Yeah, for that long.
Yeah, I actually remember a interview with James White, I believe, who was talking about Azuri that was supposed to be a ninja originally, or something to that effect. And yeah, like you said, to be sitting on it for that long, I can't wait to see what else is like in the pipeline for these upcoming sets that were like supposed to be something different, but they made some really smart pivot.
Yeah, I really respect Legend Story Studios for that, you know? Like, they don't want to release something until it's just right. And then we eat it all up.
What I also really liked about releasing a new class or a new hero specifically in these supplemental sets is that it allows players to very easily reach a critical mass of playables for that hero. When Dynasty came out, we bought, I think, 2 or 3 boxes as a friend group, right, Fuzzy?
Yeah, I remember that day.
Yeah, and we just opened up all the boxes together and we just tried to get everyone who was there a playset, 3 cards of all the playable commons in every single color. That day, we all made an Arachne deck, and then we all played against each other. And it was fairly easy to do. I think that's great. It gives everybody the ability to play this hero and to get the playables for the hero without having to go to the secondary market, really.
Yeah, I do like the format they used to release Arachne in the sense that they had dedicated slots for that hero specifically. And I'm curious to see if they'll do that again in the future instead of waiting for like a core set to release a new hero and then, I don't know, because they did the same thing with Icelander and then fleshed her out in the next set. And then they sort of did the same thing in Dynasty with Arachne. And then, I mean, not the same hero, but they did release Azuri and a lot of really great assassin support. So if they keep going down this road, we could see a lot of heroes in the next couple of years with really good support and some of it trickling down into other classes, especially if we see the return of like dual class, like Assassin Ranger or Assassin Ninja, whatever.
I think that, I mean, that isn't really the topic, but I do want to mention that that was probably, I think, some of the cleanest design that fixed so much of the limited issues.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have been talking, in terms of the podcast, we have talked about like limited environments and card design for a while. We have been having these conversations for months before we ever decided to start recording them. And that was something that because of how much we love limited, me and Fuzzy, how much we love to run these drafts, we talk a lot about the limited woes, and I did not feel that at all while I was drafting this most recent set.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Dusk Till Dawn. And so I really think that the idea of the supplemental sets being places where it's sort of like a balance patch. And so they can buff certain heroes up, they can retool certain heroes. If they wanted to do something like an errata, I know that Briar got an errata like right when I started playing and showing up to armories. And there it was like handed out every single armory, I think, were the errata
As like
cards.
a promo.
Yeah, but now it could just be a token in one of the supplemental sets rather than as a promo, right? So it gives us the ability to retool, to change, to errata, to buff. Like it is this sort of breather in the whole year that really lets us take a look at where is the game sitting and what small tweaks can we make. I think sometimes they can go in the wrong places with these tweaks. We've mentioned Everfest once or twice today. And Everfest also printed some of the most powerful Rune Blade cards of all time. And they were all, I remember trying to make Viscerai around the time of Everfest. And it felt like just getting all the mythics that I needed was like $100, $200. just because there were so many powerful mythics printed there. So I feel like they can sometimes push a bit too hard, but this is what Dusk Till Dawn is their third supplemental set.
This will be their fourth, actually.
Yeah, Crucible of War, Everfest Dynasty, Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to adjust what the supplemental set does for their game as we go forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned how dangerous it can be to tweak a hero, because Briar, I think the reason why it was as a promo because it was really, it felt like a state of emergency was being declared, because she was just going absolutely nuts in the CC format. So they were like, okay, we need to do something. And I know a lot of people had gripes about it because, and I agree to a certain extent. It's a slippery slope when a card is printed to say something, and then 2 months later it doesn't say that. And now you have a bunch of these dead cards. But more importantly, it's like, where do we take accountability for, the mistakes and how we print things?
And this was like on a hero.
Like they
eroded a hero.
Right.
They changed what the hero does.
And this was, I believe, in tandem or after a ball lightning ban, which was supposed to also fix the format. And then you see Starvo, who they didn't have to do anything because he banned himself in less than a year. Nuts.
What I think is probably the most special aspect, though, of this like balance patch idea is how they can take heroes that are ignored, heroes that have felt abandoned, where the fan base for these heroes whine and whine. We complain and we complain, and we fight so hard to get our support. And supplemental sets are really the opportunity to provide that for us. Joel, let's move into the yellow pitch. Talk about your favorite yellow boy.
Favorite yellow boy. Yeah, so anybody who knows me knows that Boltyn has been one of my favorite heroes since I started the game. I started off with the Blitz deck, much like everybody else. And to see him disrespected over so many sets has been tough. And I know a lot of people love this hero. The Discord chat goes crazy. It's a great community. We just stay Milbin. So I'm really excited to see what we get, because I know the hype is surrounded by, Vincent, Prism, things like that. And so I was thinking about what I wanted to see to make Boltyn kind of get what he deserves in a way. And I think a good place to start is tweaking one of my favorite cards in Boltyn's kit. It's actually one of his specializations, V of the Vanguard. It's rare locked at yellow, starts at 3, costs 1. And it says whenever you charge a card, you charge any number of times. For each card you charge, or your attacks get +1/+1 if those cards were light. And this enables so much of Boltyn's explosive power when he's using his Raiden playstyle. It's more mid-rangey. You take good trades. You charge once or twice per turn, usually once. And then you set up for these larger turns where you go like 4 or 5 chain links wide. And with Raiden as a free 0 for 3, 0 for 4, that's really tough to deal with. And you're leaking damage because of Boltyn's hero ability. So what I would like to see, and chances are I won't get this because it's awesome, is expanding that playset to blues and reds, because Boltyn and Prism were kind of locked into yellow. All of their specs were yellow, and some of the other Majestics were yellow. So their pitch is pretty weak outside of that, especially after Ice Heroes were introduced, things like that. So upping the blue count, the playable blue count, I should say, really helps with Boltyn, especially if you're buffing the rest of your attacks for that turn. And then red, 1 for 4, and then you charge at least once. It's 1 for 5 with go again.
That's a good rate card. That's
right.
a very good rate card.
Right, and you see cards now that basically get the same treatment, but they don't have the downside of needing 2 cards. So it's essentially, 2 cards for 5 go again.
3 cards technically, because you have to pitch.
Yeah, you have to pitch, have to play the card itself, and then you have to charge. So it is 3 cards for 5 go again.
I think I can agree with that, Joel. I think like V of the Vanguard as red, like a 1 for 4, that sounds really pushed. But also we've seen already that LSS isn't afraid to print really pushed cards for heroes or classes that really need it. Boltyn certainly could use a little bit of extra help, as you're saying. He's not exactly top tier right now. And having an amazing card, even like an overpowered card for an underpowered hero at the moment sounds like a fair way of balancing it.
I would agree because when you're playing Raiden, you don't have a lot of combo starters outside of Take Flight, which is a 1-for-4 go again when you charge at red. So adding some more chain starters makes it so that you actually have a hero ability, because if you're playing, for instance, one of his other key cards, Bolt the Courage or Engulfing Light at red, it's 3 and you charge. But if they don't block with an attack action, you're committing either an attack reaction to give a go again, or a Snapdragon Scalers, or you're praying they block with an attack action for some reason on the first attack, and then you can continue your turn as normal. So adding more chain starters and giving him access to just wider turns in general makes Boltyn a threat and not just a worse version of Dorinthia with, the attack actions in his arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I'd like to see in this new set that I think would be cool. I noticed that one of the new angels, Bologna, Archangel of War, I think it's called, is a light action ally, which means Boltyn can play it. So Boltyn already has a card shared with Prism that he could use called Celestial Cataclysm, which is a 0-for-7 go again, but you have to banish 3 cards from your soul to use it. So my thinking is, are angels going to be the new Cataclysm, Celestial Cataclysm, where if I play my cards right and I charge really well and I wait for a pop-off turn, can I just make a bunch of angels as combo enders? I have Take Flight or Via the Vanguard up front, my sword attack, some other attack actions, and then finishing off with a powerful angel attack. I'd like to see that, because then it gives Boltyn lasting board presence, and you have to deal with something. And it kind of goes hand in hand with Warriors. You have to make smart trades with Warrior, otherwise they can blow you out, at least with Dorinthia, the other warrior. But with Boltyn, it's not so much. It feels like you can kind of ignore whatever he's doing, and if you're an aggressive enough deck, you outpace him. So some lasting board presence, I think, would be nice. Mm-hmm. Also, charge as a mechanic is really tough to work around because all of your good attacks are card negative. You have the card itself, whatever you charge, and God forbid you have to pitch for it as well. That's 3 cards for your very first attack, and that's assuming you weren't disrupted or had to block a previous attack. So I think one way to make Boltyn a lot more consistent is being able to add cards from other than your hand, whether it be from graveyard, but maybe that becomes too much like Levia. So really the only other option would be from the deck, like if you can charge off the top or from your pitch zone or whatever the case may be. But I think adding that extra form of card advantage makes it so that a flawed mechanic, or I think it was good in concept, but in practice, just so many heroes do the same thing or better with less cards,
Yeah, needing 3 cards to be able to play a single card is actually really, really rough for the game plan. I remember playing the starter deck and feeling like, how am I supposed to block if I need to pitch to play, and then that card is only really getting good value if I charge? Mm-hmm. It felt very, very hard picking up the game with that Boltyn starter deck. Yeah. And in fact, I almost completely bounced off of Flesh and Blood because I had such a hard time understanding this mechanic and how to work with it. Adding this other way of souls of getting cards is good. I say make it an on-hit. If I hit, I get to charge off the top.
Yeah, and a few cards already say if it hits, put that card itself into soul. But if there's more where if it doesn't hit, for instance, it goes to soul, or if it hits
that'd be interesting.
You put the top of just something to make it because they added attack actions from Dorinthia, an objectively good design, but they took out the part of Warrior where you're supposed to care about their on hits. You know what I mean? Like Bolt of Courage is the only one I can think of because it draws you a card, but it's still low statted for the cost overall that you put into it. So adding some level of threat if it does hit, or lasting board presence or value you build over time, similar to Dorinthia, I think makes him much more playable, and then prevents people from just hopping off the game entirely if it's a bad design. Mm-hmm. And another good example of really good card design that I like for Boltyn is reduction effects from charging. So there's a card that exists now by the name of Bolting Blade. It's a majestic slot for light warriors, and it costs 4 originally. but it's reduced by 2 for each card you charge. So the combo with that is you play via the Vanguard, which lets you charge any number of cards when you play it. So you can play that, charge 2 cards from your hand, and then swing with Raiden, which is a 0, 4, or 5 at that point. And then you follow it up with a Bolting Blade, which is free for 9. And that's the kind of payoff that makes Boltyn worth playing, because now off of one resource from like my Fiendal Spring Tunic or something, I can play 5 for Via the Vanguard, 5 for Raiden, and then Bolting Blade for 9. That's what, 19 damage?
That's a lot off of a 3-card hand.
That would be a 4-card hand, and that's kind of the point I'm getting at, because 19 damage, I've seen 5 do more damage with that with like 3 or 4 cards as well. But
with like an Art of War.
Right. So Boltyn, because he's so card negative, can't even play Art of War effectively. So the workaround, I would say, is adding more cards that are statted well, but have high costs and, you know, reduce in some way or get boosted in some way, like Valiant Thrust or something like that.
Yeah, promoting a more aggro game plan.
Right. Like if I'm putting myself at a disadvantage every turn, then I should get something for it either at the end of the combat chain or at least something that has lasting value into the next turn. And so far, you know, getting +1 in the combat or in the reaction step and getting access to Gogan is strong as a hero ability, but I think there's just more to be explored.
Yeah.
And
I really hope you get the support you want. I'm so excited to see what they add to Boltyn in the future.
Me too. And I think a lot of people like Boltyn's design, but it's like as soon as they touch him, like, wait a minute, all these, you're kind of looking at the grass is greener over there, and you're like, wait a minute, I go over here and the grass is greener. There's better heroes. It's not a good hero. That doesn't stop me from trying to build a brand new version of it every couple of months anyways, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then the other side of the coin, an even worse hero and an even more dedicated fan base, I would say, is Levia.
Our goth girl.
Our goth girl, yeah. It's hard to work with Levia in a design space because a lot of her potential, I feel, is locked behind scabskin leathers and this really broken recursion mechanic.
Yeah, the ability to take things from your graveyard, put it into banish, play it out of your banish into your graveyard, and then put that right back into your banish zone.
Yep.
That back and forth jumping between those two zones.
Yep. And we've already seen it with Chain, the nonsense he can pull off. And I think because of the variants added by Scabskin Leathers, if I'm rolling actions, if I get 3 actions and I can just play a bunch of 6s out of banish and I blocked the previous turn too, like what does that say about the design of Flesh and Blood in general when every card is supposed to matter? But if I'm blocking with everything and I'm just getting him back later, I can definitely see how it's tough to touch this hero without breaking the game in some aspect. And so a lot of people usually just take what was given to Rhinar and put it on Levia. That's why most Levia decks that are performing well are just Rhinar skin, quote unquote, because they're just using Rhinar cards. So why not add Intimidates to your banishes as well? Because if Brute is a class with high variance, lots of damage, and no unhits, that's fine. Just give me more damage or give me more Intimidate so that my late game means something. And I'm not just, playing up for this late game of, yeah, I'm going to take, oops, I take 15 to blood debt and I die. Sorry. And I was winning the entire time before then. And I also had another idea because Chain and Levia didn't have very good specializations, or if they did, they locked them into like a very specific game plan.
Oh, Levia specifically. Levia's specializations were probably the greatest misstep, in my opinion, of the Monarch set because it was entirely focused around playing against a light hero. You only got the benefits if the other person had cards in their soul, which only other light heroes have. It made for an interesting limited environment, but completely neutered the card the moment that you went to a constructed environment.
Right. And
Yeah, I always thought that was super weird.
yeah.
No other specialized. It's specifically only Levia's. Like even Chains has the ability to affect a greater range of heroes. Levia's only affects other light heroes.
Yeah, for context, her legendary specialization, Doomsday, creates a Blasphemous token, which says when it attacks, you banish a shadow card from your hand. And then if it attacks a light hero, I believe it banishes a card and gives it go again, something to that effect. Now, as an ally with 6 power and 6 health is great, but it's like with no effect, like what are you supposed to do with it? I'm supposed to build this extremely volatile playstyle, and then that's the payoff I get. It's you know, a little bit of a catch-22, I guess. And then her other specialization, Soul Harvest, is a 6 mana, 3 block, blue 6, which says you may banish up to 6 cards from your graveyard, and for each Blood Debt card, you get +1, which turns out to be 6 for 12 and is more highly rated than some Guardian cards, which is great. But again, no on hit unless it's for a light hero. And I get it because I just kind of touched on it that brutes shouldn't get on hits because then they just become
like everybody else.
Well, not only that, but they also become better Guardians in a way because everything costs less than Guardians, like 2 for 6s, 2 for 8s, whatever. When you start adding on hits, it gets a little scary. So if you're going to add specific on hits that keep you in a specific play pattern, I would say they should just reprint Soul Harvest or print a second legendary spec and do something like either create yourself a Soul Shackle so that you can keep fueling your Blood Debt every single turn and turn it off some way, but that might be too consistent. So I would say even the on hit being you, whatever Blood Debt you have, you deal to the opponent that turn or deal half of it, you know,
which is so scary because Blood Debt can get very high in certain matchups.
Yeah, when it's at 15, I'm gonna die to it eventually if I don't kill you. So why don't I just give you a big attack for 12, and if you can't block it, then you're also taking it or taking a portion of it. And I think that's more emblematic with Soul Harvest anyways, because it's like a very parasitic style to the card, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of space for improving Levia, so it's really hard to pinpoint what she needs to do well. And I mean, like, what can we give her? Like, as far as equipment goes, I know she already has Husk, but like, what else could we give her in terms of equipment or cards to make her, I don't know, more consistent or good?
Yeah. So me and Joel have been talking a lot, and that's because we both love Levia. Fuzzy's been very quiet because I don't think he understands
I don't think
Levia.
I can contribute much. I'm just sitting here like, you guys really like this hero.
We love
and
this
she
hero.
is not very good, but I'm here. I'm here to see how you guys plan on making her better.
So even though this is Joel's yellow pitch, he gave me the space to put one of my card designs here. I designed this card from, I think, a relatively interesting space. I don't run Crown of Providence on my Levia, primarily because I don't have the money. But I run Ebonfold, and I really like Ebonfold. I find Ebonfold very, very interesting. I think its ability for card selection is very interesting. I think its ability to give me something to do on turn 1 is fairly interesting. I have banished a Ghostly Visit, drawn a card, attacked with that Ghostly Visit on turn 1. I've done some very interesting stuff with Ebonfold. It opens up a lot of interesting lines, even though it is objectively a slightly worse card. And it also gives you the ability to protect yourself from dying to Blood Debt. You can always pitch to banish a shadow card from your hand. Even if you can't play anything, even if your graveyard's empty, you can still stay alive. Honestly, I think that is the worst thing about Levia. If you have to spend your whole turn blocking, you just die late game.
Yep.
And it feels so bad. Or you get harpooned, right?
Oh,
The Mechanologist Harpoon card that pulls the card that you were going to use to get rid of Blood Debt out, and you just die. These are such hard situations. So what if we printed a card specifically for that moment, specifically to fix that issue, to take away one of the most toxic elements of Levia? This is my legendary headpiece equipment.
Ooh.
It is called the Diadem of the Shadow Realm. For a 0-cost action, banish 3 cards from your graveyard. If you banish a card with 6 or more power, draw a card. This can only be activated if your hand is empty.
Oh, that's so dope. Wow.
think about all the lines that opens up, all the play that opens up. One, it is still random, right? It does not guarantee that you survive. We are still playing into this idea of brute randomness. We are banishing 3 cards. This is nice. It helps keeping your graveyard nice and trim. It's not 1 random card, it's 3 random cards. Lines up with many other things in the past. If you hit that thing with 6 or more, yes, you save yourself from blood debt, but you still get an effect. You get to draw a card that you can then arsenal. Being able to arsenal at the end of your turn means that you aren't just throwing away your old hand, dying to blood debt, and then nothing happens.
Or pitch to your weapon, or pitch to the card that is in arsenal.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know if this can have go again. I think there are 2 levers that can really control the power of this card. Go again, and whether or not it has blade break. So I think... And obviously, we don't have the time to play test this for hours, make up mock card. We barely had time to get together. We're recording this in the middle of the night. So those are 2 levers that I think we can really look at, is whether or not this action has go again. It's definitely an only once per turn. I do not want to imagine what could happen if you could just do this over and over and over. And really, it's so niche. Your hand has to be empty. You have to have spent everything. So you can
literally do control Levia that way, though.
Yeah.
Find enough.
We do have a defense reaction that can be played from the Banished Zone, Guardian of the Shadow Beast.
Yeah.
It was something that I was thinking about as I designed this card, was its ability for that. Now, Battle Worn I think is too strong. Blade Break means that you have to think about, do I need the block or do I need the ability to not die to blood debt?
Yeah.
Because this always gives you the chance to not die to blood debt and give you an arsenal card. Always. That is so important. It also doesn't fully fix the whole graveyard situation, because if you're blocking with your whole hand, you're putting 4 cards into graveyard and then you're banishing 3.
Yeah.
You're not keeping your graveyard at a net neutral. You are always increasing the graveyard, always kind of throwing off your ratios. So even in the control game situation, your graveyard's going to be growing. That probability of you hitting the 6 power or enough 6 powers is always kind of going to be lessening. It's always going to be fluctuating, and it's not going to be super reliable. It's not going to be reliable to block with whole hand, do this ability, right? Block with your whole hand, do the ability. It's not going to work out in the long term.
See, this might be a profound level of copium, but I don't think that's broken, to be honest with you. I think that's really cool because, again, it ties you into this play style that is very volatile, and anything that goes wrong can just straight up lose you the game. So if I'm playing Levia over Rhinar for just access to 4 more blue 6s, I want something else, you know? If it's not Intimidate, it's more ways to banish or go again or whatever the case may be. At least some way to not die to this mechanic that I'm trading so much but reliability and Rhinar for Levia.
And that's really what this was supposed to do. It's to give us that, okay, you don't just die to blood debt in the late game. It doesn't just happen.
And
I'm convinced.
Yeah. And
the Blade Break is a payoff, because when do we use Blade Break on these equipments? In the late game. So in the late game, you are really presented with this choice of, do I need this block or do I need this ability? And with Scab Skins, it's actually interesting, because if it doesn't have go again, then you do need to roll Scab Skins to be able to do something with that extra card.
I completely forgot Scab Skins with the card while you were talking
Which is
about
why
that.
I think natural go again should not be printed on it.
Yes. So with all that being in mind, and I've already talked about why Scab Skins is so problematic, I think, definitely no go again for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it should have Blade Break.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we deserve it. We
do. You know what? We deserve this.
I've gone to plenty of armories, RTNs, ProQuests. I paid $40 to play Levia. I don't know. I feel like I paid my dues.
You almost made me spit out my drink.
I feel like I've done what I needed to do.
All right.
You poor things. I hope you get what you want.
Thanks, Fuzz.
For Blue Pitch today, I wanted to give you guys an idea for what a Shadow Rune Blade might look like as we await for LSS to come out with theirs. And We've only had one in the past. I just wanted to come up with some ideas for another one. I took a little bit of inspiration from the description of Vincent that was been posted on the Dusk Till Dawn marketing. I'm going to read it for you guys now. Mm-hmm. Vincent brings a new interpretation of the forbidden arts to gaming tables. Her ability to manifest dark arcana by rune-gating it through the dimensional rift serves the demonastery in their quest to extinguish the light of soul, returning Wraith to a blank canvas of darkness from which it can be rebuilt in the uncorrupted vision of the demonastery.
Spooky. I like how they say uncorrupted vision, but like, don't they deal with like demons and stuff like that? I feel like that's the most corrupt. Anyways,
they deal with demonastery.
Demonastery, yep.
So, my Runeblade, I wanted to call him Xedge, Lord of the Gate.
Ooh.
Because I like this idea of like dimensional rifts and rune gates appearing everywhere. So I want to imagine him as like overseeing some of these gates. I gave him the ability at the start of the game, create a dimension door token, which I'll get to in a second. When you pitch a non-attack and an attack to play a card or activate an ability, put a gate counter on a dimension door that you control. So he's rewarding you for playing non-attacks and attacks, typical Runeblade stuff. And this would be a Shadow Runeblade with like 40 health and 4 intellect, nothing crazy there. So a dimension door is a token aura with the text, at the beginning of your end phase, if this card has no cards under it, you may move a card from your banish zone under this card with cost less than the amount of gate counters on this card. And you may play cards that are under the dimension door on your turn, like you normally would, as if they're in your hand.
So, okay. So every card that's in your banish at the start of your turn, or beginning of your end phase, you bring them, or you can play them, or you...
Based on the number of gate counters, you can put cards from your banish into your dimension door. Once it's in your dimension door, you can play it, but you need to have enough gate counters to move them in. So if you want to move a card that costs 2, you have to have 2 gate counters on your dimension door. And remember, you put the gate counters on by pitching both a non-attack and an attack action card for Xedge.
Love it.
So I think that this is cool because it gives Shadow a chance to play things from Banish Zone that you normally wouldn't be able to play from Banish Zone. Because right now, all of the ability to play things from the Banish Zone has to have that specific card text printed on it, right?
Oh, like you may play this card from Banish if you do XYZ.
Yeah, but this seems to imply that it could be anything. So if you got 2 gate counters and you had banished a Command and Conquer, you could play Command and Conquer from your Banish Zone.
Oh, that would be sweet.
Pull Banish Zone out of there, throw it under your Dimensional Gate, and then just always have one whenever you want it. That's pretty cool.
Kind of like a little arsenal zone, kind of. As I've written it, you can only have 1 card under your Dimension Door because Dimension Door will only grab 1 if it has nothing under it. And it's kind of like playing from your hand, right? Like you're kind of increasing your hand size by 1, assuming that you've been able to get gate counters onto it.
Yeah. Plus, it's Shadow Runeblade. They're going to have the cards that say you can play this from Banish Zone anyway.
True. So at least this way, unlike Chain or he who shall not be named, you
Chain.
can't. He who shall not be named,
Right.
You can't get 7-8 card hands like he can. At the most, I think it would be maybe 6, right? With that.
So far I haven't given any mechanics baked into the hero that allow you to banish cards, right? Like Chain had his Soul Shackles. So far, Xedge has a way to get cards from banish and be able to play them with his Dimension Doors. So just keep your eyes out for that. It's coming. I also want to mention that you have a single Dimension Door, but I designed a legendary Xedge specialization. I call it Rupture the Rune Gate. It costs 2, it pitches for 1, it's a red card, and blocks for 3. And I gave it the text, create a Dimension Door token aura under your control. If you control a Dimension Door token with 3 or more gate counters, you may move 1 onto another Dimension Door that you control. So this allows you to get a second Dimension Door with just this single card. If you want to be able to play with 2 Dimension Doors, you have to draw this card. If you don't draw it, then you don't get to play with 2 Dimension Doors. And you'd have to warm up either one. And with the way that Xedge is worded, you can only put 1 gate counter on a Dimension Door at a time. You could pitch like 4 cards in a turn to get 2 of these gate counters on, but you would need a single if you don't get them on both automatically.
So it's kind of like playing multiple copies of Aether Vial from Magic the Gathering. Like you can sort of build up your board that way by cheating things out, and it requires like some setup, I guess, because you're just pitching non-attacks and attacks, which is not that difficult to do. But I like it. I like the hand extension, but the sort of finesse you have to have in order to get these extra Dimension Door tokens.
What I think is really elegant about how you designed this card, Fuzzy, is that you have it so that it's less than, right? I just want to confirm that with Dimension Door. It's less than the amount of gate counters, right?
Yes.
So you always have to have at least 1 gate counter to be able to use this ability. Because I can easily see like a red line version of this deck where it just runs a bunch of 0 cost red 4 go-agains. But that's not what this is at all.
Yeah, you kind of need to run cards that have resource costs in order to be able to pitch a non-attack and an attack, right? You need to have things that cost at least 2. And those things are going to need at least 3 counters to play themselves. So there's a trade-off between things that are expensive that make it easier to make the gate counters, or things that are cheap that are easier to play from the Dimension Door.
Yeah. I think I would also want to know if by play you mean like as if it was just in your hand. So you still need to pitch to play the card.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's kind of nice because then it means you can end up in situations where you are replacing the gate counter after you play the card from under it.
Oh, yeah. That is interesting, actually.
Just sort of keep it active. I can see that maybe getting a little rough in like late game situations, but I don't think it should normally be too bad because you're pulling this from your banish zone. So like I guess it depends on where you're banishing from. If you're banishing from a graveyard like Levia does, that's a big issue, right? Because you're just able to essentially take your hand and throw it into the pitch zone and then just play out of your banish zone for the entire game. That's not great. But if you are banishing from your deck, then it's probably fine.
Yeah, this card definitely thrives, or Dimension Door in general thrives in the mid game, because early game you won't have anything in banish theoretically unless you Art of War or something like that. And you have to pitch towards something, and usually anything more than 2 doesn't have go again unless it's like Zealous Belting or something weird like that. So
I think there's a couple Shadow Runeblade cards that are specifically like if you play this from Banish Zone, it has go again, or like if you've dealt arcane damage, it has go again.
Right, but to create the gate counters, you have to pitch a non-attack and an attack action at the same time, right? Yeah, so you'd have to...
At the same time?
Yeah, it'd have to be at least 2, if I'm understanding correctly.
Wow.
Which is balanced. This is how Runeblade should be.
I really liked the Dynasty cards.
Yeah.
Like, you have to pitch 2 cards, a non-attack and attack, in order to get a bunch of benefits. And there's definitely inspiration for this design.
Yeah, I like it a lot so far.
I feel like I'd really have to abuse the arm equipment. So I would pitch a blue to create a rune chant.
Oh goodness, the grasp.
And then with
This would be
the one,
insane
and
with
then with
grasp.
the one floating, I would then pitch a card of the other card type.
It wouldn't work that way.
Well, I would still use the 1 mana from, say, an attack action, and then the other mana from a non-attack action.
Yeah.
When you declare that you're casting the card would be when you have to pitch both the cards. You could do it the other way, where you use your excess mana to make a rune chant after, or no, you could use
Because you can't pitch a blue and a yellow for something that only costs 2.
Correct,
right?
but you also can't take floating mana from some other thing and count that towards an ability like Xedge here.
Well, I think Clark is talking about if you pitch a red and then a blue to activate an ability that costs 2.
With Grasp, that would be amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you were
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, I was technically saying what Fuzzy was saying, but simply reversing the order still makes it work out.
Yeah.
Because it has to be both that are pitched to that ability, not that you have floating from when you pitched a non-attack
You'd
previously.
be getting the gate counter from pitching to Grasp.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know that. I don't like that. I don't even like that for just Runeblade in general, because Runeblade's trying to play stuff that's cheap. It makes me feel like I want to run a lot of reds and then pitch a lot of reds. And if I'm not getting a lot out of that, I don't feel very good. But that's
Yeah.
just how I felt running that type of running like Deathly Duet and Viscerai. I haven't enjoyed it because I find myself only getting one effect or the other effect when I want to be trying to get both.
Yeah, but you also want to save your reds because Runeblade is very card hungry. So you're playing a non-attack to get a benefit and then to amplify your other attacks, and then you pitch another card for your weapon or something. So
And naturally, it stacks your pitch too. So you're going to be always
Exactly.
drawing the attack, non-attack. Once you get
Exactly.
to your second
Yeah,
cycle.
it might be interesting to see this in a defensive Runeblade sort of option.
Yeah,
Runeblade
yeah.
does have more 0 cost 4 block defense reactions than other classes. So maybe.
yeah,
One other thing I want to talk about really quick, because I feel like it's a key piece of analyzing how we imagine this Xedge guy playing. His weapon that I gave him, I called it the Key Rune Blade, because he's Lord of the Dimension Doors. So you need a big old giant key, like a rune chant, in order to open it.
Real.
And he wields it like a blade. He's a Key Rune Blade.
Definitely not a Kingdom Hearts ripoff.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. I call it a one-hand rune blade sword weapon. So a one-handed weapon we haven't really seen much in Runeblade before. As an action, banish a card from your hand and the top of your deck as a cost to use this ability. Attack. It attacks for 1 by default. When you attack with this weapon, you deal 1 arcane damage to any target if you have an attack action card in your pitch zone. And when you attack with this weapon, you deal 1 arcane damage to any target if you have a non-attack action in your pitch zone. So you could be dealing 3 damage, 2 pings of arcane, and the 1 physical if you have both an attack and a non-attack in your pitch zone.
wow.
That's pretty cool.
And it doesn't have a resource cost, but it does cost a card from your hand into banish and from the top of your deck. But the cards in your banish with Shadow Runeblade, you can either get them back with Dimension Door, or if they happen to be cards with Blood Debt, you could play them at a later time. This attack doesn't have Go Again as written, but
Okay, that was my next question.
it sets you up. I also have the Dimension Door grabbing things at the beginning of your end phase. So if you want something to not hit you from Blood Debt, or if you want to like take immediate advantage of whatever's in there, it wouldn't sit around in Banish Zone. It would hopefully go into the Dimension Door.
Cool.
Right
Would
away.
Blood Debt trigger first or second?
You could.
Like before or after this?
My design intention was that you can dodge the Blood Debt a little bit by taking a card from Blood Debt and putting it in the Dimension Door.
Okay.
That's why I put it at the beginning of the end phase instead of the start of your turn.
Okay.
I think it would work like that. Like I think you could like stack the trigger, maybe.
Yeah. It's odd because Blood Debt, the big fallback is supposed to be if you can't play this when it's in the banish zone, you're taking the damage.
Yeah, but you only get 1 Dimension Door, so it only slightly can stop. Like if you have multiple cards in Blood Debt stacking up, you're still going to get overwhelmed.
Yeah, and you're still going to want cards in Blood Debt anyway. If anything, this is definitely a healthier version of Chain because Chain would just banish 5 or 6 cards off the top.
Play all of them.
And then play all of them. This is a lot better because you're trying to banish cards with Blood Debt into there to help you with those bigger turns where you're trying to pitch a lot to activate your weapon, to activate your Dimension Door. You want to keep cards in hands for pitch, so you want to be leaving your cards with Blood Debt in the banish zone so that you can have those bigger turns.
So I'm reading here that Blood Debt triggers at the beginning of your end phase.
Oh no, maybe I wanted it to be the other way around. Maybe I wanted the
that-
Blood Debt to hurt you anyway, so you couldn't dodge it.
Right, because then...
These are some ideas that's been floating in my head for a while. So
Which I like.
Because if you make
Which I
them
also
both
like.
beginning of your end phase, active player can choose which effects to resolve first. So you could theoretically remove a card from Blood Debt with your Dimension Gate.
but the trigger would still resolve, right?
Yeah. Oh,
I think it would.
yeah, you're right.
So you can't dodge the Blood Debt. You get the Blood Debt damage.
Taxes and Blood Debt, the only things you can't dodge.
Good. You're right. This is healthy Shadow Runeblade.
Never thought I'd see the day.
Are you guys ready to move on to our Arsenal Zone?
Yeah, let's go to it.
So this is the part of the podcast where we shout out cards that we've been thinking about lately, things that we like or dislike. We've got a couple. We've each picked a card to share, and I think we're going to start with Clark.
I want to give a shout out to Ebonfold. I mentioned it when I was talking about my card, the source of my inspiration for the Diadem of the Shadow Realm. It just creates such interesting plays. Being able to sacrifice it to put it in your graveyard for Levia Being able to turn off Blood Debt while still cycling a card is really interesting. It gives you some really interesting turn 1 abilities. I've used it to get 3 cards in my graveyard on turn 1. I've used it to turn off Blood Debt in the late game. It also just won me a very close game at our most recent Armory in Blitz, where I used it to block the last 2 damage from an Icelander, leaving me at 1 life to come back and win the game.
Nice.
Everyone forgets about the Spell Void 2 on that card.
Sure do. Gotta love when they pick up that card and read it.
And it won me a game. It helped me go 2-2 that day. So thank you, Ebonfold.
And that's all we can ask for with Levia. Don't go negative.
Well, you know what? It's a rare card, and I think it's so interesting to play with. And I think that's really special. I think it's really special to have those rares, those commons I think interesting.
That's a common, because that's in the Blitz deck, right?
Oh, yeah, it might be.
I don't play any Monarch heroes, but I'm jealous of y'all headpieces.
Yeah.
They look fun.
We have Rosetta Thorn, so we're even. I'll go next. My card that I'm shouting out this week is Lumina Ascension. It's one of my favorite cards in Boltyn. Pretty much all my cards in Boltyn are my favorite, but this one especially. I'm pretty sure it's in contention for the most words on a card. And yeah, talk about, the fear on somebody's face where they realize it's a printed card, it's real, it has all those words, and they're trying to make sense of it. I'm like, don't block until the last bit or you're dead, is basically it. Especially when you slam 3 of them down at once. Also, this card comes in extended art, and it is gorgeous. I just picked up my playset as soon as I knew the set was coming out. I think even before Dynasty, because Spear Ivorina came out, and I instantly picked them up. And it's just an extremely powerful effect. I don't know what the intentional design of it was, like if we were meant to play 3 in a turn and try and kill our opponents, or if it was like, oh, we swing a sword or our sabers 4 times or our hatchets 4 times. But I like what we've been able to do with it, and I hope to see more cards like this in the future.
I love that card too. Like newer players, they get told Boltyn's a terrible hero. Because they're curious, They're like, who is Boltyn? Don't worry about it. And then they play against a Boltyn for the first time, and they get slammed with 3 Lumina Ascensions, and they go, what? You just dealt 40 damage to me in 1 turn. People told me Boltyn's a bad hero.
I remember the first CC game I played against you, where you played Boltyn. I was playing my Viserai. You got down to like 8 health. I was on 36, and I'm like, man, Boltyn's trash. And then you were at 20, and I was at 18, and I was like, what happened here? What happened? When did this happen?
Oh my gosh.
I went on to win that game.
Yeah.
All right, so today I'm shouting out. This one comes from Limited. It's Come to Fight. Specifically, Blue Come to Fight. You open pack 1, pick 1 of an Outsiders draft. What's the first card you pick? You're wrong. It should be Blue Come to Fight every time.
Didn't you have a deck where you had like 12 Come to Fights in it?
I won. I had 3 out that draft. I had like 10 Widowmakers and like 10 Come to Fights. And that was all I needed in my deck.
What?
Okay, listen. In Outsiders draft, there's these daggers, right? Azuri's going to come at you with these freaking Spider's Bites. And she's going to play them every turn because everyone and their mother is playing Pile Azuri, where they just run as many freaking cards as they can. And they just like pitch to Spider's Bite every turn. Come to Fight blocks for 3. It's meant for blocking, and it's not an attack. That makes it unique in this draft, and anyone can run it. It's a generic card. You can pick this card before you decide what hero you're running. That's value, friends. Value. That's good drafting mechanics.
And it's blue. What do I say every single time we draft with new people, Fuzzy?
You say, don't forget your blues.
Don't forget your blues. You need to be able to pitch to play your cards. Everyone's looking at these spicy red cards with their 4 attack, 5 attack, and they always forget that they need the blues to pitch.
And look, I'm not saying that LSS made the best PR when they said, focus on your fundamentals instead of worrying about whether it's Belgium or Japanese packs. But I think they meant pick Come to Fight early.
What does that even... What?
There has to be it. There's no. There's
When
no
LSS said work on your fab fundamentals for the Pro Tour, they meant pick come to fight early. I believe it.
Come to fight. We're gonna change the limited meta. We're doing it, Fuzzy.
So for our second ever episode, I actually brought 2 copies of Blue Come to Fight
Wow.
to give to you guys to commemorate the occasion, and I'm gonna sign them for you.
For the record, I never picked Blue Come to Fight. The only-
Neither did I, but that's because the one draft I did with 4 outsiders was with Fuzzy, and he took all the blue to come to fight.
And I won.
Yes, he did. He did win.
You won for
Wow.
you. One
Thanks,
for
Fuzz.
you.
I would sign full art Lumen Ascensions for y'all, but I just don't got it like that. At least not yet.
It's okay.
In due time.
It can be my thing.
Pitch It To Me podcast is hosted by Fuzzy Delp, Clark Moore, and Joel Recinos. Our executive producer is Talon Stradley, logistics coordinator John Farkas, music by Dillon Hulse, logo by Han V, and sound mixing by Christopher Moore. Last but not least, we'd like to thank you, the listener. Thank you for tuning in. Please give us a follow on your favorite social media platform at Pitch It To Me Podcast.